and I'm just speaking as a, with respect to the esteemed company with me, but I'm just talking as a father, as a family member, because my youngest son has been in the forensic unit at Montana State Hospital since December of 2010, which is over 2 years ago. And he was committed there after pleading guilty to 3 felonies. The court determined that he was unable to appreciate the criminality of his offenses. And because the court found him to be guilty but mentally ill, he's serving his sentence on the forensic unit in Warm Springs. He's 26 now, and he's been afflicted with a serious mental illness, schizoaffective disorder, since he was 16. Up to then, he was like any other young man growing up, going to Capitol High School, playing football, wrestling, serving on the Civil Air Patrol, about a B student, but by the time he was a junior in high school, he couldn't go to class. He had to be homeschooled by the district. It's taken me until this legislative session to speak openly about our experiences. In part because I've worked as a provider of children's mental health services for nearly 20 years. And if anybody should know how to get help, it should be somebody like me. But I can't tell you the number of other people I've spoken to, family members, including everything from doctors to laborers. It doesn't matter who you are in terms of when it's your child. I guess I've encapsulated this. It's just not possible to describe what it's like when your child is totally incapacitated by a serious mental illness. Looking back, we know that his mom and I looked everywhere we could to get him help. He had 4 suicide attempts, but really was never in trouble with the law until he had a psychotic break that was so serious, so complete, that he seriously injured one person, including 2 people, including a sheriff's deputy. So since then, and since that experience, we've gone. In fact, we saw him on Saturday, and I think we said that this was about our 110th trip to Warm Springs since he's been committed there. Well, since he started, since he was put there. He's getting better, and because the medication he's receiving now has virtually eliminated his psychoses and delusions. And I just have to add that we suggested that they take a look at that medication over 1.5 years ago. And it's been about 3 months since he started being given it. We know that when he's paroled, he'll require ongoing mental health treatment, and his eligibility for Social Security and disability Medicaid benefits will be restored upon his release, where we hope he'll be referred to and released to a supervised mental health treatment program, the Share House in Missoula. We know that his treatment, his care has been very expensive. At the end of his 2 years, we know that the state of Montana will have exceeded $400,000. His care will have exceeded over $400,000 in state general fund, which is ironically, I think, what we're looking at for an appropriation for the whole state for crisis services, in one aspect of it. And looking at Senate Bill 11, sponsored by Senator Caferro, its central importance lies in compelling guilty but mentally ill parolees to comply with the requirements of supervised mental health treatment program. As most guilty but mentally ill patients will be released from Montana State Hospital, as their length of stay is about 500 days. This bill's ongoing treatment compliance and parole revocation sanctions greatly support the safety of parolees and the public. I just, you know, couldn't help but be impressed in all these drives back and forth to the Montana State Hospital. You start thinking, I'm not a numbers person, but $570 a day, 505 days on average, 35 forensic patients. It's a lot of money, and it's all general fund. I'm really, really impressed with the support our legislature is showing for programs, legislation to support serious mental illness, crises, getting seriously mentally ill people, staying in the community, back to their communities, and trying to find out more about what we need to know to do a better job and do a more cost-effective interventions. And Senator Mary Caferro has been a great proponent, and I'd like to have her go next. Thank you.
So first up, I want to recognize and thank John Wilkinson for being willing to speak up publicly about a personal situation that's not easy to do, and without people speaking up about their personal situations, we wouldn't be here today. We need that kind of support. So the legislature has put together a package of bills that responds to mental health crises. And what we seek to accomplish is to be good stewards with taxpayer money, to increase public safety, and get people onto the road to recovery. A couple of those bills are House Bill 16 by Representative Hill that would clarify that it is an emergency situation when someone is in danger of serious physical harm to themselves or others, and when they have symptoms of mental illness that prevent them from meeting their essential needs of health and safety. Another bill is Still LC by Representative Jenny Eck, who's here today, so if you have any questions, you can ask her. That would provide funding for Montana children in a mental health crisis, because currently there isn't funding for children in crisis. I'll talk a little bit about my bill, which John referenced. I drafted this bill, Senate Bill 11, after meeting with the Patients Council at Montana State Hospital. I realized after that meeting that people who had been judged guilty but mentally ill were being kept in the hospital for too long because there was not a system to guarantee that they could continue treatment of their mental illness once they returned to the community, and that they were being set up for failure and recidivism by a system that doesn't understand how to keep them safe in the communities and how to keep the public safe once they get out. The fiscal note revealed that my instincts were right, because the criminal section of Montana State Hospital, consistently beyond capacity, realizes a recidivism rate of these folks of over 60%. So what we're doing now does not work. It's hard to explain how expensive the broken system is, but I think John did a very good job. And the last thing I'll say is John's son has been elected to the Patients Council, so next time I go to visit, I'll get to meet him in person. The other side of the coin is, of course, if people who are sentenced guilty but mentally ill are expected to comply with a supervised treatment plan once in the community, we have to have the community services to help them comply. And so I'll introduce to you my colleague and committee member, Representative Pat Noonan, and it was through his leadership that for the first time since 2009, we've increased funding for community-based crisis and jail diversion services. Thank you.
Mary, thank you for the great introduction. In light of recent events that have happened, I think it's very important that we take a critical look at our mental health system. It wasn't that long ago that, due to an expensive, ineffective system that limited law enforcement's options to handcuffing people struggling with a mental illness and driving them to the state hospital, resulted in Warm Springs being over capacity. In response to public outcry, previous legislators answered with new policies directing local crisis and jail diversion solutions that are more humane, less costly, but due to perceived budget cuts, the funding for that has been eroded. The funding for some of our crisis interventions has been eroded. As reported in our subcommittee on Health and Human Services, the sheriff from Gallatin County stated that in 2010, law enforcement transported 69 people to the state hospital. Now, if you fast forward to 2012, they only transported 9 people from Gallatin County to the state hospital. These services are working. They deserve our support, and for the first time since 2009, they're going to see an increased funding and increased support from this body, which is very important. With that, I'd like to turn this over to somebody who's been very important in the direction that we as Democrats have taken in addressing mental health issues this session, our minority whip, Ms. Margaret MacDonald, who is a representative for Billings. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Noonan. I was happy to be able to serve this year on the Law and Justice Interim Committee, and we spent a lot of time looking at restorative justice and also at things that are working in corrections and that are not working. And one of the things that emerged from those studies during the interim was the extent to which our correctional system has become, if you will, the kind of safety net for the broken pieces of our mental health system. And so one of the things that we came out of that interim with was legislation that would address re-entry. Understanding, as we have just heard so eloquently articulated by both the 3 previous speakers, that people who are coming out of our correctional system are often people who have serious needs in mental, to support their health, their mental health. And we're looking at other states like Oklahoma, for instance, that have reduced recidivism from, somewhere between 39 and 60% down to 24% by really focusing on those mental health needs and bringing resources that help people stay in the community so they're not bouncing back into the mental health system. And so the other side of that coin is in House Bill 68, a reentry bill that we have moved through the House of Representatives. This is coming to the Senate. In addition, Representative Jenny Eck has got a bill to study Montana's public institutions to ensure that we are providing effective, compassionate care to those with mental illness in the most cost-effective way possible. Again, these are simple, cost-effective changes in our system that help make our communities safer and our families more whole. Representative Ellie Hill has got a bill that would require, House Bill 238, would require the Department of Public Health and Human Services to develop housing plans for mentally ill patients being discharged from the Warm Springs State Mental Health Hospital. You would think it was there already, but it is not yet there. And then House Bill 319 with Representative Carolyn Pease-Lopez would assist youth in transition to adult programs to make sure they receive the necessary assistance to plan ahead and consistently treat their health situations. So with that, I would like to turn it over to one of the most articulate and well-spoken advocates in our state for persons with mental illness, and that is Matt Kuntz from NAMI.
Thank you, Representative MacDonald. I just want to deeply thank the legislators behind me and all of the legislators that are working on mental health crises. We watch the news and we see a lot about Sandy Hook and Connecticut, Aurora, Colorado, but there's a lot of tragedy in Montana. It's not glossy, it's not super horribly dangerous. It's just sad and deep and powerful to our families. And we need legislators that are willing to step up, and I've never seen it like I have this session, and care for our families and actually look under the hood of the mental illness treatment system and see how to make real effective change to make our communities safer and to help improve our families' lives. I'd like to turn over to Alicia Smith, the consumer representative for NAMI Montana.
Thank you. I like to say I am the face of mental illness. I've lived with mental illness since I was a child. It takes a fair amount of courage to stand up and say that in public, but not as much courage as these people behind me have shown by taking up the cause. Several of the things we know now, early detection, and early diagnosis and early treatment pays off, and we need people to be kept in our communities. Because when you send them out of our community, they lose all of their support system. They often lose their housing, all of the things that were in their homes. The families often have to drive distances that are just not reasonable. And most of the people, I believe, that are in Warm Springs right now could be better served, not only less expensively, but more effectively in our communities. So with that, I want to thank every one of these representatives behind us.
And with that, we're open for questions. Yes. My bill, Senate Bill 11, revising the criminal justice system for guilty but mentally ill, has made it out of the Senate. It only had 2 votes against it. So unanimous out of the committee, unanimous on second reading, and nearly unanimous on third reading. Of course, the motion that Representative Noonan talked about to increase the funding for crisis and jail diversion services for local communities has passed unanimously in our subcommittee as well.
House Bill 68 has crossed over to the Senate, and Jenny's bill, House Bill 289.
My House Bill 289, which was a study bill, was tabled in committee on Friday in the Human Services Committee. We had many proponents, no opponents, and there was not a whole lot of discussion, so that was a frustrating loss, but we haven't given up on it.
The transition bill, House Bill 319, will be heard this afternoon in Human Services.
And I think House Bill 238 is on the table in House Judiciary. Is that not right? That's Ellie Hill's housing plans for people coming out of Warm Springs.
House Bill 16 did pass the House, passed on second, third reading. It's headed over to the Senate. We couldn't be more excited about that.
And also
in terms of fiscal notes on this kind of stuff, obviously the appropriations bill has to, there's money involved. Can any of you speak to, just in a broad sense, the cost to some of these programs?
I know that in other states, the terminology is reinvestment in basically institutions and corrections, and that just lowering recidivism out of our state prisons is enormously cost-effective investment. So in states like California and Texas and Georgia and Missouri and Oklahoma and Oregon, enormous savings and savings are now being put into these systems by upfront investments. And we know that for $500,000 for the reentry task force that we were putting together, and that the reductions in, a year in Montana State Prison or a year in the women's prisons is pretty significant. I know states are saving hundreds of millions of dollars by these investments, and they're pretty modest. Case managing people coming out, making sure that they transition and keep their prescription medicines that they need, that they have health coverage when they get into the community, that there are jobs for them, that they can find housing, and keeping them from recidivating in the next 3 years is pretty modest compared to having them get back into that prison. But I don't have dollar for dollar comparisons.
I take it there's no more questions. Well, we would really like to thank everybody for coming. This is an important issue as we kick off on Monday. So thank you very much for coming down. I think there were a lot of great questions, and I think we put forth some very important information. And one thing that I would add to the cost is As we talk about community diversion services, although we have to put some money up front to be able to make an investment in that, the cost offset is seen pretty quickly. We have the exact quote on how much it costs a day. Maybe it was $500 and some a day to be in the state hospital. Your average stay is 2 months or more. And so by having crisis facilities put in place in the communities, we take that down to 3 days. We get people back in the community at a much better rate and in a sense that is far more healthy for everyone. So thank you all for coming very